Good morning. For me, prayer turns burdens into blessing. Much of my journey so far has been an even-footed, clear, straight path. One that's tidy and orderly, measured and secure. I could tell you exactly where I was heading, how I would get there, and the grace of Christ's love meandered in and out of my life. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing if I could. I feel God has placed me, whether it be in Blaze or at school, in a nurturing, loving Christian environment, for me to mature in and slowly grow in faith. The HSC hits you hard though, especially in the couple of weeks of limbo between the end of school and the first English exam. For me personally, the weight of anticipation, pressure, and expectation really came down upon me. And for me, the wide path began to narrow and the surroundings blurred. I began to focus on the immediate things around me, and I fooled myself into the illusion that it was by my strength that I would achieve. I lost sight of the path and the cross that has set me free of sin. And at one point, I just stopped. I was done. I'd hit rock bottom and I couldn't go on. Too many quotes, too many numbers, and too much to do on my own. And that's, I think it's through these moments that God demonstrates his faithfulness to us. It's only then and when we realize we're hopeless and weak that his strength and power is made perfect. And when we put our problems into his hands, he puts his peace into our hearts. Psalm 18 verse 2 says, The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, in whom I take refuge. He is my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I think God places us in these situations ultimately for our good and for his glory. He reminded me of his awesome wisdom and control. What do I have to fear when the Creator is by my side? The Lord who knows everything that has happened and will happen and will come. In my hour of need, I was surrounded by his people, sheltered by his problems and promises, and comforted by his sovereignty. Throughout the exam period, I was blessed with messages of encouragement and comfort, even from people I hadn't been in contact in for a long time. And I was reminded of the immeasurable outpouring of love God gives us, whether it be through fellowship or his word. I really felt the presence of the Holy Spirit working in and around me through the brothers and sisters in Christ. And spiritually, spending each morning in devotion to his word was a great opportunity to quieten my heart and really allow his will to be set upon me, to use my talents to the best of my ability for the glory of his name. Matthew 6 verse 25 says, Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Prayer for me was everything. It was a time I could surrender everything to his will and direction to my life, and an opportunity of praise and thanksgiving for his endless love and faithfulness. I wouldn't say knowing God makes even the most stressful events in life, like the HSC, easy. But what this trial did for me was produce perseverance, character, and character hope. When I seek his kingdom and his righteousness first, I have the faith and assurance that he has my back and that my life is in his hands. He makes every moment of hard work, memory, and diligence worthwhile, because it's ultimately for the furtherance of his kingdom and his glory. With the HSC results coming out this week, things will certainly get a bit nerve-wracking again, but I assure you, I'm assured of his faithfulness. Jeremiah 29:11 says, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. My prayer for the upcoming Year 12s is that they will also find peace and calm and take refuge in the Lord. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so I've grown up with having God preached in my life in every aspect. And even so, my relationship with God was a bumpy and long ride. There's been days where I feel like I'm immersed in his love and can feel his presence. And there's been days where he's felt distant. It was about last year where my walk with God changed like I wouldn't imagine. From being at a very sheltered school, where we'd pray before exams and where we have teachers and peers to talk about our walks with God, to a public school, which reminded me of a prison having random gates and was very dull and lifeless. I was in an environment where both teachers and peers swore, and fights would break out in the middle of the playground and during class. And nevertheless, I stuck at it. I found it difficult to keep up. The learning environment was different, and teachers taught differently, and everyone was just competitive. I lost motivation, and I didn't care, and I had the mentality that year 11 didn't matter, and that I would try harder in year 12. I partied almost every weekend, getting drunk, and I got out studying and sleeping a lot more. I noticed with my walk with God, I was very, very distant, and it became really, really challenging, and I began to lose trust in him. But nevertheless, I stuck at it and I clung on to him. I remember thinking years ago, 2015 was heaps far away, and I didn't have to worry about it. And now we're here in December. I've graduated, finished year 12, had my formal, and turned 18 and sat the HSC. This year was going to be the year that I got my life together, and I proudly can say that I've done it all, regardless of how much my life has changed. I don't want to get into this too much, but for some of you, you may know that I've lost my father 2 months ago. I never thought that I'd lose my dad at 17. Being 2 weeks out from my HSC, and I crumbled. I didn't know what to do or how to feel. Knowing that he wasn't going to be there for the rest of my life or for any of my big achievements, that shattered me. I remember on the first day of HSC, I was screaming and carrying on around the house. And I thought, I'd call Dad and tell him that it was my first day. I got onto my phone and I saw that he wasn't on my contact list anymore because I realised he passed away. I struggled with every aspect of my life, trying to self-medicate and find comfort. But I cannot stress how much I trusted in God this year, knowing that he had a plan far greater than I could ever imagine, and that he would look after me. Now, being days out from HR results, I can fully say that I trust in God. I don't know what my plan is for next year, and even if it's not going to uni, I know that I'm comfortable with having his plan instead of mine. To say the least, my walk with God has been challenging. I've questioned, rebelled, and I trust and love him. And I question every single day whether I'm worthy of God's grace and God's love. But I know this. I know he's a God who loves and a God who forgives and tests. He's a God who holds you in his arms in times of mourning, and a God who heals. I know by far I'm not the perfect Christian, but I know that, and even I question my own faith, but I know that if God wasn't faithful, I wouldn't be standing here today. I wouldn't be in his house, in his arms. I'd be rebelling against him, finding comfort and self-medicating. but no matter what, I still cling on to him. His love has captured my heart and keeps drawing me in. And I'm going to leave you with a few verses from Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1 to 11. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. He has made everything beautiful in his time. He has set also eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ronald, and though I might look like it, I'm not one of the high schoolers. I serve with, a few others in the high school youth group, which we call Blaze. So when we speak of God, his faithfulness probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind. His love, grace, mercy, his sovereignty, his goodness. These are the qualities that we most often speak and think of God, and in turn, what we most often praise him for. But over the past few years, in my own faith, and through serving in the high school youth group Blaze, I've come to understand and experience that these qualities, love, grace, sovereignty, these qualities mean little without faithfulness. These characteristics that we trust and hope in are meaningless in a God who isn't faithful to his children, if from day to day his promises change. These qualities are meaningless if our God isn't a God whom we can unswervingly depend and rely upon, even when we are so unreliable and fickle. Psalm 105 says, "For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations." To each of us here this morning, all of different ages, or from different generations, God's faithfulness means something different. To the married couple, wife and husband, God's faithfulness means one thing, whereas to the recent graduate just out of uni looking for a job, his faithfulness looks completely different. This morning, I'd like to share with you what God's faithfulness has meant for the youth in our church, those in our youth group Blaze. This is a generation of high schoolers who are as much part of this church as you and I. A generation who, as much as any one of us older people, have gone through the difficulties of our church in the past few years, as well as trials of their own. To this generation, this is how God is faithful. To the youth group who went away for Easter camp, and for 3 days and for 3 nights faced torrential rain, God is faithful. God is faithful in using this rain to forge new friendships, to draw you closer to one another, and to remind you of the importance of time spent together. To the youth who came from Singapore and shared life with us for 2 years, God is faithful. From the many doors that were opened to bring you here, brothers and sisters who loved and were loved by you, to the realization that you came to that God is real. God was and is faithful in planning each step of your life and will continue to do so. To the 2 mischievous Year 9 boys who drew the short straw and were part of my first Bible study at Blaze, God is faithful. God is faithful, and you have both grown out to be young godly men who I had the joy of serving with. To the student for whom school was not a place of learning, of community, of encouragement, but a place of torment, bullying, and loneliness, God is faithful. God is faithful and answered our many prayers, providing for you a school, where you can flourish, a school where others share your interest, where friends are actually friends and care for you. To the young teen whose mother was unexpectedly diagnosed and continues to fight the battle against cancer, God is faithful. Though the questions of why did this happen, why me and my family, are difficult to answer, and for a time, church was not where you wanted to be, God is faithful. It is He who brought you back, and it is He who will not forsake you. To the 2 children whose father passed away from cancer, God is faithful. God is faithful as He walks by your side through this valley of death, as He lends you strength and carries you, as He brings people, prayers, and peace to you. God is faithful as He fulfills His promise to be your rock and refuge in this life that was promised to have difficult times. And to us Blaze leaders, the ones who have had the joy, responsibility, and often difficult task of walking with this generation of youth, God is faithful too. God is faithful, and for myself, His faithfulness is no more greatly experienced than when you fall and stumble. When you would rather not be there on a Sunday morning because you are tired and getting up felt like you're going to yet another day of work. When you make up a Bible study on the spot, and when your ministry plan is more week to week rather than year to year. When you sit by a youth and they cry, and they tell you what it is they are going through, and you are there, powerless. When things seem to be going so well, and then one of your youths walks away, from Blaze, from church, and all you know is that you feel guilty, responsible, frustrated, defeated, but yet you're also so unsure of what to do. When you hit that moment of fear driven by the thought that you have not been faithful to the precious lives a judging God has entrusted to you. These are the moments when I have most greatly experienced God's faithfulness. I don't say this out of self-pity or out of self-criticism, but it really is in these moments when I know deep down, in humility and in honesty, that God is faithful. When on that dreary Sunday morning, God is faithful and brings youth each week. Youth who are excited, youth who make you laugh, and youth who, despite their age and regular immaturity, genuinely love and care for you. When your plans are so short-sighted, and yet God is faithful, and so somehow things work together, and each time you meet, youth come to know a little more of and draw closer to God, and you stop to reflect, and you realize that when you were at their age, you never knew God as they do. When there is nothing you can do as they go through hardships, God is faithful and reminds you that all you are called to do is to simply walk with them, that your presence, even in silence, can speak comfort and companionship into their hearts. When you see a youth walk away and you're left lost, God is faithful, and that is all you can really hold on to. This is a part of His plan too, and He will work in ways beyond you to bring them back. When you hit that point of fear, God is faithful, and He says to you, it's not up to you. More than you could ever do, and more than you could ever imagine, I love these youth, and I will provide, protect, and hold them. This is what God's faithfulness has meant to me. Psalm 105 says, "For the Lord is good, and His love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations." To the generation of youth, those of you of Blaze, past and present, through walking with you, I have undeniably experienced God's faithfulness. I know that high school is a really difficult time. Growing up and going through adolescence is confusing. You juggle the expectations of parents, pressures of friends, demands of school and society. You battle your own thoughts and your own demons, all the while preparing for an exam and trying to figure out your faith. But amidst all that, I hope and pray that each of you realizes that you are created and loved by God, and through you, God is working powerfully. I can testify to that. Walking with you in Blaze has been an opportunity that has given me many grey hairs and has made me definitely need a solid 2-hour nap every Sunday afternoon. But it is an opportunity that I am incredibly thankful for. My own faith and walk with God has been blessed infinitely just by sharing life with you. To the older generation here, those of you who are part of this congregation and this church, we young people are difficult. I admit that. We have grown up in a world vastly different to that in which you grew up in, and because of that, we are spoilt and lazy. But having had the chance to walk with the young people of this church for the past 6 years, and having had the opportunity to love them, I implore you to walk with them, to walk with us. They say that our Christian life can be represented by a cross. One beam of wood placed vertically to represent the relationship between you and God. One beam of wood nailed horizontally to represent the relationship between you and those around you. From where I stand, our church and this congregation is strong vertically, and that is a wonderful thing. But what of the horizontal? What of our relationship to one another? What of you and I? Psalm 105 says, "For the Lord is good, his love endures forever, and his faithfulness continues through all generations." Our God is a faithful God, and his faithfulness does continue through all generations. From the very young, still wearing nappies, to those of you in high school, to those of us forging our careers, to those here who have graying silver hairs, this is truth and will always remain true. For us, though, the question that God asks each of us and the opportunity that lies before each of us is whether we will partake in his faithfulness, whether we will choose to experience and live this truth out in our relationship with one another as we walk side by side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. Wow. I think we have received a lot from our young people, and it is really up for us to respond to that. Brothers and sisters, as we sing a song to wrap this up, let us think, what is our legacy to our young people? A lot of times we only see ourselves. We are very fortunate to have them with us at a time when young people are not really seen in the church anymore. We should be thankful to God's faithfulness for keeping them here, no matter how much of a nuisance they may seem at times. And the sharing, I reckon, is just enough for you to think, what have I contributed to the journeys of these young people, them being part of this congregation? So as we sing this song, it talks about a generation rising up for the glory of God. Let us sing this from our hearts, and I'm going to challenge you to respond tangibly this morning. But before that, let's prepare our hearts first, because we don't want this to be coerced. The message is enough to touch you in here, and we need to act it out beginning today. Let us all stand.